This is Radio Bilingüe. In California, KSJP Fresno, KMPO Modesto, KTQX Bakersfield, KHDC Chular Salinas, KUBO Calexico El Centro, KBUH Laytonville, K246 BOFM Paso Robles, Arizona, KREE Hurteville Douglas, New Mexico, KYOL Chama, KQTO Hurley, KBMG Raton, Colorado, KHUI Alamosa, in Texas, KRZU Batesville Crystal City. Affiliate stations in California, KERU Blythe, KBBF Calistoga.
This is DJ One Hoop, and you are listening to KBBF 89.1 FM Calistoga.
Dad, guess what's happening at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds on Saturday, October 24th?
What is it?
There's going to be another North Bay Science Discovery Day, starting at 10:30 a.m. all the way to 4 p.m.
Now I remember. There'll be hands-on science and technology exhibits. We can see live eagles and owls, find out how radio and satellite signals work, and build our own robot and lots more.
We can race floating cars, look at the sun through a special telescope, and find out how to protect local animals and plants.
Let's take the whole family. There will be something for everyone. It's happening on Saturday, October 24th, starting at 10:30 a.m. at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds. Admission and parking are free.
Saturday, October 24th, join KBBF for our second ever Trunk or Treat. Lowrider cars, live DJ music, food, drinks, and candy for kids. There will be a costume contest, so dress up to impress. Admission is free for all. Saturday, October 24th from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. at 1700 Corby Avenue in Santa Rosa. This is a fundraiser for KBBF Radio. For more information, call 707-545-8833.
KBBF 89.1, la primera radio bilingüe comunitaria en los Estados Unidos.
All right. Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. I am your host, Kaiya Kramer, and this is episode 63, Transition Radio Interview, here on KBBF 89.1 FM Calistoga. And I am coming to you because I am very, very interested in sharing my guests who I have on hold here, because the name of this show is called Perspectives. Well, I mean, the name of the show is called The Queer Life, but the point is to share perspectives, to share points of view in terms of gender identity, sexual orientation, and all manners of queer identification. And my guests this evening are from Transition Radio, which is an online radio that has been running very strong for the last couple of years now. And I have on hold right now Mark Angelo / Maritza and Lynna Arielle / Paul Cummings, who are a married gender variant couple who are the hosts of Transition Radio's Real Talk podcast. And they are here today. I'm very privileged to have them on the show and to share their perspective. I'm going to bring them on right now. Mark and Lynna, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. How you doing?
Yeah. Hey, I want to thank you both so much for taking the time and joining me this evening here on The Queer Life.
Oh, we want to thank you for having us.
Yeah, so it was the first question I'm going to ask, and this is going to be probably a very interesting segue for us and the rest of this interview here is, and this is the question that I ask every single guest on my show, and that question is, and this is for both of you, what are your preferred gender pronouns, gender identity, and sexual orientation?
Let's see, do you want to take it first or?
Well, I just, myself, I'm a they, and I identify as a gender variant born male who expresses in a feminine manner.
Yeah, and I also go by they or she, whatever anyone feels comfortable calling me, because to tell you the truth, it doesn't really matter to me what people want to call me. I was born female body. I have, every cell in my body reads and spells female. And as far as my sexual orientation, I've been known to say I'm pansexual. I was a lesbian when I was younger, and now I guess I'm heterosexual, because, Lynna and I are a heterosexual couple, and I'm bisexual, pansexual. And yeah, it's never a straight answer, because life is never a straight road. I mean, things go up and down, sideways, things change all the time. Views change. Yeah, views change. My views have changed dramatically since I first transitioned back in 2003.
Wow, so it sounds like the experiences for you in particular. Do you prefer me to refer to you as Mark or Maritza?
You could call me Mark. That's my legal name.
Okay, great.
Whatever.
It sounds like you have had identification in terms of many forms of the LGBTQ, because you've been lesbian, you previously identified as T, but and both of you now are using the term they and gender variant. Could you explain to the audience in your own words what gender variant means to you?
Well, in my opinion, gender variance is an issue that basically the definition for me is that I identify as an expression, the gender that I choose to, personify the most. So if I'm, for example, if I'm expressing a feminine expression of me, that is who I am. But I also recognize that I was biologically sexed and born as a male, and that I was socialized as a male. And I don't forget that, because I realize that there is nothing that I can do to ever change that part of me. Gender expression, though, is a varied spectrum.
And looking at words, what is gender in the first place? And I think it's just something that was created to put us all in a box, to send us off to work, to label people. But I look at gender variant as something that it's like electricity. It goes up, it goes down, it goes all sorts of different directions. As I was growing up, sometimes I felt very feminine, sometimes I felt very masculine. So it's nothing written in stone or concrete. No one can define me. And I don't believe that it is right what society is doing in forcing people to actually fit into either a male box or a female box. So gender variant kind of fits pretty much for me, because I'm neither here nor there. I'm just me.
how do you think society is forcing people to fit into these boxes, as the queer community calls the gender binary, if you will?
Well, everything's gendered. Everything has to be labeled either male or female or masculine, feminine. Yeah, and it's like forcing people to make up their mind what they are. And then those that don't fit into that box, like for instance, a lot of male-born individuals don't feel very masculine. So they feel, well, if I don't feel very masculine, I must not be a male, I must be a female. And I think this is where this transgender narrative has kind of come to existence, because people can't fit where they are, so they want to create a new box.
And society doesn't allow that expression to be on display, because men are typically a certain way and women are typically stereotyped as a certain way in this patriarchal society that we live in.
I mean, this very much touches on the very simple questions of what is a man, what is a woman, how would you go about answering that?
I don't think there's a true, clear definition in reality of what is a man and what is a woman. I think society has tried to create clear definitions. They say, well, a man has a beard, a man wears a lumberjack shirt, a man loves to tear down things. You know, that's what society wants a man to be. But in reality, men have different forms and different fashions. Some men are very gentle. Some men are very rough. Some men are a little bit of both. And the same goes for females. Some females have a very nurturing nature about them, yet some of them don't. So we can't, as a species, really define what a man or a woman is. We've tried, and I think we are failing miserably. And I think this is why we have all these wars and arguments between sexes. And like they say, men are for Mars and women are for Venus. You know, it's a crazy thing. Tear that down completely and let people just be.
And another thing is that historically, the role of the male and the role of the female have been different things to different cultures. So it's really not something that can be defined just because we live in this society in these times that we live in.
Very interesting. It the notions of masculine and feminine have in many ways become a human issue. I mean, obviously we don't see dolphins and bonobos complaining about these issues. But in your bio here, which the bio is available on the webpage for this episode of this radio show here, which you can find on thequeerlife.org. If you are having trouble finding it, all you have to do is Google The Queer Life. And this is episode 63, my interview with Transition Radio. This is my interview with Mark and Lynna Cummings, who are the hosts of Transition Radio here on KBBF 89.1 FM. And Mark and Lynna, in your bio here, you say your show is now focused, now present tense, focused on helping people realize the importance and respect for others in the LGBA community, while at the same time finding truth and respect for self in the gender spectrum. I see that there's no T there. You do LGBA, and I'm getting, my understanding is lesbian, gay, bisexual, asexual community. Why do you choose not to have the T in the use of that acronym?
Well, actually, A stands for allies, and the reason I don't add the T there, because I really truly believe, and this is my opinion, and that the word transgender, transsexual it's like a new letter that has been created for people that don't fit or feel they don't belong in the LGBT. And that now, since there is a major medicalization of this whole narrative, that people want to create this word, this feeling, this essence of being transgender. And I believe that every single one of those individuals that identify as transgender has somewhere down the line have been either lesbians, gays, bisexual, individuals that have cross-dressed, and now feel empowered to be this transgender, to focus on this medicalized word as gender identity disorder, gender dysphoria. So I really think that by just promoting the transgender thing, we're missing out, or we're totally disregarding the LGB.
Now, the trans trans is, the acronym that we're using nowadays to make a nice little word out of it. But transgender, I mean, the actual definition for transgender isn't that out of gender to the other side. I don't understand why we would think that we can actually, in our sex biology, transition from one sex to the other. Now, we can express as we choose, and that's great, but an actual sex change of a dimorphic sex species is not possible.
Do either of you identify as transgender? You say you're gender variant, but it sounds like there might be a difference here.
Well, I used to identify when I knew no better back in the day when I came on. I used to be a strong advocate for this community till I started doing a lot of research, till I started really knowing a lot of transgender individuals. Then I was like, I cannot identify as this anymore. I cannot support transgender people anymore because of there's many issues. I believe that there is a self-driven me, I component to transgender agenda or transgender narrative that forgets that there are other people, like women, for instance. We're very pro-women, and we're very pro-rights of the species that has been really suppressed by men thousands of years. So now, I mean, the way I look at it, if trans women is fighting for all their rights, are like disregarding the rights of women. And, you could probably explain it a little bit.
Well, instead of coming alongside women, which is what I, initially wanted to do, even when I believed that I was capable of transitioning from my sex as a transgender woman, the fact that I wanted to honor women. I wanted to honor that species that's been oppressed by people,
right?
By mostly.
Lynna, earlier you brought up the point that the definition of transgender, and I'm just trying to clarify for myself and the audience, because on this show, my own definition of transgender has been just from as close to the etymology of the word. Trans, the Latin prefix meaning across or beyond, and gender could be in this case, the sex that you were born with. And I understood it, and I understand it to be that of an identification. Is in terms of your belief, is there anything inherently wrong about having an identification that is, let's just say, beyond that of your birth sex?
No, I mean, both Mark and I, are actually two-spirit as well. And, we come both from a native background. I'm Puerto Rican and Mark's Cuban.
Could you explain what two-spirit is real quick to our audience?
Yeah, two-spirit is the identity that one has with both the masculine and the feminine of the species, and being able to relate to both.
It's an energy, a frequency that the natives, we're Taino Indians, that's our background, our heritage, that was very much practiced. And we kind of call it old souls that have lived life in both genders, so they're very well equated with both genders, spiritually wise, not physically, because I think physically you really can't I look at gender as a personality, as traits, as a way of being, but not as an identity. So I look at two-spirit as a frequency, an energy source that runs within our spirit realm.
So in the spiritual sense, does that tie into beliefs of reincarnation necessarily? Different? You were talking about old souls. Does this connect to past lives? Or?
Yes.
It can.
Yes, it can.
When I originally saw this term LGBA, and again the A, as you said, is for ally, and I'll be asking you about that in a second. But it's there. I've actually heard a lot of trans people saying that the T doesn't necessarily belong in the LGB acronym. because it's gender identity or gender expression, depending on whom you're talking to. And LGB is about sexual orientation. Does that tie into your use of the acronym as well?
Well, the T itself, I think, is actually becoming more prominent than the LGB. It seems like lesbians and gays are coming across as wanting to transition to being transgender because they are given this thought that, you know, a lot of FTMs, more so even now, they are wanting to make this change because they don't accept their lesbianism. And it's something that's overwhelming them. So they then cross over to thinking that they're trans.
What do you mean they're not accepting their lesbianism? Could you expand on that?
Well, there's been a lot of individuals who come out as lesbian first, let's say.
For instance, Avian Dowling, you know, he's been in the media, you know, with the men's fitness and everything.
Right.
He originally came out as a lesbian,
a butch lesbian, and at, you know, 20 years old, you know, then her girlfriend actually, you know, mentioned that perhaps you are a man, you know, would you think of yourself as that? And then that was like a trigger point, you know, and that seems to be a common assumption that a lot of butch lesbians make.
Especially nowadays when it's become such an, I like to say, such an in thing, because back in 2003 it wasn't, but now it's like the amount of emails that we get from mothers that are concerned that their teenage daughters that never shown a single sign of being boys are claiming now that they're boys.
Right.
So it's one of those things that there's still shame in being gay and lesbian. I mean, as far as we've come along with gay marriage and everything else, people, shame. If you look at Iraq, gays and lesbians get killed. Iran, I'm sorry. They get killed. Yeah, hey, you want to get surgery, you want to change your sex, we'll pay it for you.
Yeah. Saudi Arabia, they're trying one of their princes right now, and the issue of him having sexual relations with males was a big part of that. And so being gay or lesbian is still extremely dangerous in many parts of the world. I mean, don't even step foot onto the continent of Africa.
But Germany as well. Yeah. Russia was
Russia, actually. Yeah.
But
you know, religion has a major play in this. You know, it's like I've noticed that a lot of so-called trans women are Christians.
Yeah, they still hold on to their faith, and a lot of times that is because they've been oppressed so much by their own faith and suppressed by it that they feel that the only way that they can be reconciled to God and still, you know, have feelings for men is to transition. Because gay is out, you know, so, you know, they feel that is something that they need to do.
Right. I mean, but what about the trajectory for, let's just speak about trans women who never came out as gay men and are transitioning and identifying as women. Where does that come from?
Well, we look at a lot of the studies out there regarding what Blancha mentioned. You know, you've got the homosexual men.
They've been discredited by, you know, the trans community, but we still think that they have, you know, some validity. You know, people that have done a lot of research, like Zucker and Blanchard.
Right. So we're looking at autogonophiles. You know,
could you define that word for our audience?
It's short for HEP now because autogonophile is a big word, but they're calling it HEP now.
It's when you love yourself as you would as a woman. You know, loving a man, loving the autogyna, which is woman, part of them. So they no longer are just wanting to love women, but they want to become the women that they love. So they're wanting to emulate, female characteristics, female, appearance. And, when that cross-dressing goes to another level, and it's usually a non-homosexual male who would do such a thing, they would want to transition and become a transsexual woman.
They become very much in love with the image that they're creating, the image that they see in the mirror, that everything becomes second nature. Everything now becomes the focus of changing, and out of thousands their job, lose their homes, lose their family. They leave a destructive path. And we actually had a guest by the name of Eugene Pitchler who talks about this as an addiction that could actually be treated with anticonvulsion drugs. Neurological impairment.
So it's interesting that you're bringing up the term autogynephilia. That term, if I remember clearly, has been sort of shunned by the mainstream trans community. Why would you say that? It's
well, because of the shame that
the sexualization of what is going on with them. A lot of it is driven by a lot of sexual innuendo, a lot of sexual fantasization. A lot of these people have also been involved with other types of paraphilia that they are associated with as males, like BDSM or other types of things. So this is a huge problem within the umbrella of the transgender community that is being overlooked, that is being washed under the rug, and they don't want that ugliness to exist. But the fact is that autogynephilia isn't just a sexual thing. It's not like that whole, concept of it being some promiscuous whatever. It's just the fact that they adore themselves as a feminine, version of themselves so much that they will do anything to become that.
It's interesting that you bring that point up, because I was going to ask you, there are trans-identified asexuals who wouldn't have any necessarily sexual compulsion to present as the opposite gender.
It doesn't need to be sexual at all. Actually, the release of dopamine, there's a release of a chemical called dopamine in the brain that gives you a high, kind of like when you take drugs and you feel that initial rush, and you're constantly feeling this amorous type of feeling for self, and you may not even get an erection, it may not be anything sexual at the least, but it's an emotional rush, an emotional high. It makes you happy because you've never had, let's say, somebody who really truly loves you, so you create this image and you fall in love with this image. I mean, how many trans individuals, especially trans women, if you go through Facebook, you're going to see pictures after pictures, selfies, people lying on the couch, on their bed, it's look about them, like, God, I'm so good looking, this stuff. I mean, really, and it's not just men that are, wanting to look like women. It is also women that want to look masculine and look like men. I mean, it's autoandrophilia, which hasn't been discussed, but it's the same, because I could attest to that. When I first transitioned, I became literally in love with myself. I would look at myself in the mirror, and it's like, wow, what have I created? It's like, it's like picture after picture, and you're just like, you can't get enough of yourself.
Right. Well, hey, let's put that idea on hold for just a moment, because we're gonna have to go away for a short break. I want to ask you to please stay on the line, and we'll continuing this interview. And if you are just tuning in right now, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. This is my host with Mark and Lynna from Transition Radio. And we are talking about trans identities, or not trans identities. That's part of the questioning and perspectives that are part of this episode right now. You are listening to this here on KBBF 89.1 FM Calistoga. You can find this episode and more available on thequeerlife.org. We're going to go away for a short break, but we'll be right back after this short break.
You're listening to KBBF Community Radio 89.1 FM, Calistoga, Santa Rosa.
Estás escuchando KBBF 89.1 FM, Radio Cultura, Calistoga, Santa Rosa.
KBBF 89.1 FM, conquistando tu corazón.
Right. Hello, everybody. We are back. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show. LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. This is my interview with Mark and Lynna from Transition Radio. And I want to welcome them back. Mark and Lynna, are you still on the line there?
Yes, we are. You sure?
Great. So we were just talking about trans identities, trans women, autogynephilia, the male equivalent of that, and a fixation on the image of the male body, or the image of the female body in terms of self. Am I getting that right?
Yes, you are. And all we have to do is really take a good look at transgender community, how focused they are on self. I mean, I'm sure you've been around a lot of trans people, and you identify as trans yourself. You become so self-centered and so into what you're creating that everything else kind of takes second stage.
Especially when you're on that road to transitioning where you're not quite done. You want to get various surgical procedures, and if you can climb to the top of the proverbial mountain and be able to get the SRS or the equivalent for an FTM of a phalloplasty, I mean, this is something that is just,
it becomes an obsession, a total obsession. And anything that becomes an obsession, we see this in regular individuals that want to get plastic surgery to fix their face, and they're never happy, and they're always getting more and more surgery to the point they hurt themselves.
Right.
Like look at Michael Jackson, look at Joe Rivers. Anybody that becomes excessively obsessed with their look, with their image, with their persona, something's wrong. This is not about trying to be the other gender, because it doesn't even become that. It becomes an obsession of changing the body, almost like a body dysmorphic disorder.
Right. It's interesting. That's when there's new transgender people who are newly transitioning or coming to question their own gender identities and self-image. There is an emphasis on the physical part of it, and there's sort of a focus there. But something that I will remind my listeners, and a message that I constantly try to put out there, is that trans identities aside, whether or not somebody decides to undergo major surgeries or chemically alter their bodies through hormone replacement therapy, we as human beings, and I speak as a trans person, do indeed need to focus on the rest of our lives, because it goes for anybody. Nobody is defined by one identity. I mean, is that sort of the part of the point that you're getting at here? Is there's too much emphasis on just being trans?
Yes, and one of the reasons I believe, as a medical professional, that a lot of this stems from neurological impairment. A lot of individuals that identify as trans have some form of autism, Asperger, they have anxiety conditions, they have OCD, they're very obsessive compulsive about many different things, they're very depressed. So gender dysphoria, it's almost like a cough to a cold. It becomes the focus because that's something that they feel that they can alter, they can change. But these gender specialists are not looking at the true issues here. And this is why transgender identified individuals are never really truly happy. They get from point A to point B, and when they're in point B, they want to get to point C. And it's always a vicious cycle. They're always battling some sort of depression. Towards the end, it becomes like an exhaustion, and that's why we're seeing a lot of people now detransitioning, because after they get everything done, they're still not happy. 20% of trans-identified individuals after transitioning commit suicide. There's a higher rate of suicide after transitioning.
I mean, what do you say to all the people who quote unquote have physically transitioned successfully, that say that, hey, and I'm just speaking hypothetically here, for the people who are saying, hey, I've had gender reassignment surgery, I've had hormone replacement therapy, and it's successful. I'm happier, I'm more functional. I mean, what do you say to the body of people out there where that's the case for them?
It's a honeymoon stage still. I mean, I didn't start questioning what I did till I was into my 12th year of transition, because in the beginning, it's all very new, it's all very exciting. It's like a brand new car, brand new toy. And after the years go by, and you can't run away from yourself. Your conscience starts to talk to you. I started to feel like an imposter. Like every time I met somebody, I had to out myself because I felt like I'm not being truthful. There's like a little inner voice that kind of tells you, I did all this, but I'm still not authentic. Because you can't be authentic. Every cell in your body is still that cell and that DNA of the original gender.
What do you mean by authentic?
Authentic, real. Like I never felt real. I felt like a replica. Right.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point, because I have talked to a lot of trans-identified men and women who are saying, well, I've had the surgeries, I'm no longer trans, and I've posited and argued with them. Okay, you can identify whatever way you want for yourself, of course, but I posit the question: what's wrong with checking the other box? There's in the gender queer movement, there's sort of this other gender idea, and I see a lot of people, especially youth, gravitating towards that. Do you care to comment on that?
Well, I think that the concept of being stealth, I mean, isn't that what spies do when they're hiding from, being discovered? I mean, I just wonder what stealth has anything to do with being an authentic person.
Could you describe real quick, what stealth is for our audience?
Well, after they transition, they think that they can live the life of a typically biological male or female that they choose to identify as. And because they've done whatever surgeries or whatever changes that they've made, some are more successful, obviously, than others physically, given their, their DNA structure and everything. They're capable of doing that. But the fact is that no matter what, the most beautiful trans woman would ever do, she cannot identify as being a natal woman. There is no way that they can actually, assert themselves as the female species, which they were not born as. You have people like Janet Mock saying, "Oh, I was assigned male at birth." I mean, no, you were born a male. You were born a male with male genitalia, and no, it's just your sex, reality, and that is something that people in the trans community need to get over, is the fact that their sex reality is one thing, their gender expression is another.
Right. Yeah, that's that is an interesting point. Janet Mock has in the past referred to herself in as a female identity at a time when she was not out as an openly trans person.
I could tell you something that is causing a lot of problems, and that was my trans peak moment when Janet Mock had an interview with Pearson there.
Piers Morgan.
Yeah, Pearson. Yeah.
To me, like everything that those of us that advocated in the day got destroyed by Janet Mock, and I saw the downfall of the trans community, because now these kids want to be the actual gender they are trying to transition to, and that is why they're committing suicide, because they can never feel that completely, so they feel like failures, and they should be happy with who they are. They should be able to express. If you're a feminine man, be as feminine as you can be and be happy with that. It doesn't matter how you want to dress and how you want to express. We are all for that. But to sit there and put down the original species of female women and say that you are actually a woman, that is disrespectful.
Yeah, and actually the fact that, this vernacular that is being used, that, males have vaginas and females have penises, that has no place in the argument of what a sex reality is for a male and a female.
It just makes us look crazy when people say that.
And you're talking about it in the biological sense, right?
Yeah, in the community, a lot of trans-identified trans women say, "Oh, women have penises." No, women don't have penises. Women have vaginas, and that's very disrespectful to the Native individual. That every cell in their body is female, and now they're disrespecting them by saying, "Well, some females have penises." No, they don't. Unless you're an intersex individual that has some sort of chromosome anomaly, unless you have an ovary and a testes, unless you have the different variation of intersex, you can't claim to be anything otherwise than the gender or the sex that you were assigned at birth.
And that's being overtaken by the trans community, is the intersex diagnosis for their lady brain or man brain condition.
Which the brain is not sexed. That's something that, is crazy as well, because the brain is something that's very plastic and very malleable, and depending on your life experience and depending on how you've been raised and brought up, will depend on the things that you have, or your DNA, your personality. But there's no such thing, like we hear all the time, "I have a lady brain," like Janice has mentioned, and many of times, no, you don't. You're just a feminine little boy or a teen now.
Right. So what would you say to the person who says, "Okay, well, I accept that my sex is what I was born with, but my identification," and they're choosing the word their choice is to use the word identification, is that of a female. What would be your response to that?
How can they, how can they identify as a female when they were born, socialized, raised, DNA, everything is male? They could express things as the gender that they feel they are, but identifying as a female. I mean, I kind of have a problem with that. You could say, you're gender variant, gender queer, you enjoy feminine things, but a female identifies as a female. They don't identify, they are female. Women are born women. They don't identify as such. They are. They're made in the mother's womb, not in some Thailand operating room.
A lot of it, what you talk about here seems to be about a major paradigm shift, a sort of a deeper understanding of acceptance of bodies and expressions. I mean, what do you think it'll take for that understanding to go through in society, at least in Western culture?
To get out of our minds and go into our hearts, to realize that we're spiritual beings here on a journey of growth. We need to stop being so materialistic, so self-centered, and realize that we are all one as a species, and we're evolving, and there's a paradigm shift taking place. And instead of being so focused on self, do things to help each other, do things to help the problems that we have in the world. I mean, we're so focused on transgender violence and suicide, and we don't realize that little girls are being killed every day, their genitals are being mutilated, sold into slavery. You know, bigger issues that are more important are being overlooked because we're being so self-centered.
I mean, every life is important, and nobody is diminishing the fact that trans women of color are under a lot of violence and stuff like that. But we're talking, we're talking 20 when 1 million of, little African girls are being butchered under this sexualized, patriarchy that destroys women's lives, and that's just one group of people in one country. And, women have been getting oppressed for thousands of years. They're the weaker, physically, the weaker species, and men are more dominant. And instead of appropriating ourselves as women, those who identify as trans women should acknowledge that they are not, and actually be a friend, be an ally, be a support system. Don't try to usurp what belongs to women. It's theirs. It's not ours.
And I'm sure you've heard of all the attacks that women are getting from trans women when they use certain words as pregnancy, periods, words that are uterus. And
Could you expand on what those what that is? What the attacks are? What are people saying?
Well, they're saying that it's too sensitive of a word to use because, oh gosh, a trans woman doesn't have a uterus, so that just, really offends me if you use that word. And, that has no place.
They're attacking women by telling them that if they don't go to bed with them and consider the trans woman a lesbian, then they're being transphobe. They're attacking women for using words that are native to women. They're attacking even the latest. We went on a conference for women's...
the Midwives Alliance of North America, they did a conference in Albuquerque, and they had a speaker there who is well known for his gender book. He's the genderbread, little figure.
Yeah.
Sam Kellerman. And we went there to offer questions to Sam. And,
why all of a sudden the language that has been there forever, pregnant women, is being now changed to pregnant persons? And the language is being changed because female to male are wanting to have babies and they don't want to be seen as women. Well, excuse me, but if you have a uterus and you're carrying a child, that is a woman.
Right.
Nothing more woman than childbirth.
And that's being attacked. It's something that has been there for women for centuries, since the beginning of time. So this community is really, really doing crazy things to try to change the world to fit them instead of trying to coexist with the world. They want to. It's almost like a eugenics and an agenda, some sort of weird Twilight Zone.
So instead of women actually being able to stay in the guidelines that they have to change that wording to pregnant person. And not that it didn't include, trans people, but they actually had to take the name woman, pregnant woman, out of it. And that is such a disservice to an oppressed already, class of humans.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. It's the question: should the remaining 99% of people who aren't trans identified have to conform to the terminology that the trans and queer community is putting forward? It's a question that I've asked in terms of the word cisgender. It's a valid argument for somebody who isn't transgender, as in everybody else who's saying I don't want to be called cisgender, but the other side of the argument is, well, we just need to have a word to describe it, and so it's a conversation about words here.
The word is woman and man. I mean, that's what it's been always. So why is the world having to bend forward and backwards to accommodate the trans community? Also, we're seeing this crazy eugenics taking place with children that are being labeled trans when since history there's always been feminine boys and masculine girls. I mean, this has gone way long time ago. All of a sudden now these kids are being said that they're trans and they're being transitioned, put on dangerous blockers and given cross-sex hormones at a very young age and having their breasts removed at age 12. There is a study that claims that 80% of these kids that are gender variant or gender confused end up being just gay or lesbian or just eccentric kids. Why are we pushing kids that tomorrow, 20 years from now, are going to go, what in the world did you do to me?
And for these types of drugs that are very experimental, and the doctors will tell you themselves that they are not very studied, and there is no long-term study on the effects of these dangerous chemicals being pumped into a 9-year-old, for instance, a puberty blocker called Lupron, which basically has already been indicted as having so many bad effects for regular nasal women, and they've already got lawsuits for using this drug, the manufacturer. It's gone off the deep end, all because these gender clinics, we believe there's a gender industrial complex that is trying to manufacture a condition that is able to be, fed by big pharma, doctors that seek to make a profit, and lifelong patients.
Well, I mean, if they're trying to seek a profit, trying to target less than 1% of the population is a bad financial model. but I digress. I mean, these kids, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, who are making the decision to get on puberty blockers. That's a big decision. But what do you say to the kids who are making the other big decision of taking their own lives at 10, 11, 12 years old?
Did you realize that 41% suicide rate is actually not even true? It's been inflated. And these kids had no idea about committing suicide until this whole suicide propaganda has been put out there. Plus, the kids, even after they transition, they still commit suicide. Adults, after they transition, still commit suicide. It's not that their gender dysphoria is making them kill themselves. It's that they have other issues: depression, neurological impairment, autism, Asperger's, issues that are not being looked at, and the quick fix is here. Give them some blocker. These kids have behavioral problems beforehand and nothing to do with gender dysphoria.
I mean, if the mother has already got a kid who's got a problem with OCD or has, some real neurological issues, and they're given this option to be able to calm their kid by giving them this out, they think of it as some kind of a, godsend, because this kid's been driving them up the wall for their whole lives with how their behavior has been, but this is going to tame them somehow. These drugs and things that are being sold at that, and the kid buys into it and starts acting more calm and more, capable of, coping with life.
But the thing is, it's not long lasted. I actually had a conversation with Jess Jennings' mom and because I know them personally. And in the beginning, when the blockers and all that stuff, Jazz was acting up, as do many of these kids, because you are not only blocking the production of, their testicles dropping or doing whatever it is that they do, you're also blocking the development of the brain, which now you're dealing with a kid that already has an issue. The issue is going to become tenfold.
And just to clarify for our audience, Jazz Jennings is the highly televised trans youth who went on the hormone blockers and eventually went on female hormones at a fairly young age, right?
Correct.
So we've touched on a lot of subjects here, and we have just a couple minutes left here. Are there any messages that, and I ask this to all of my guests, anything that you would say to somebody who is questioning their gender identity and wondering about what to do next, from your perspective, what would you say to them?
I would say learn to love yourself the way you are. Everyone in life has some form of dysphoria, something they don't like about themselves. They don't get to change it. Learn that life has its ups and downs. And when you learn to accept life, not in your mental state, but in your heart space, you realize that there's nothing in life that you can't conquer. We can all have what we want all the time. Learning to make the best of life, learning to do for others and not just for self, might be the salvation. Be in touch with your spiritual self, and not religion, spirituality. Become one with nature. Go out hiking. Enjoy what Mother Earth has to offer.
And understand that, there's nothing that any scalpel can do to change a condition of the heart. Because after you've been through all the things to transition and you go all out and you have lots of money and you do whatever to your face, you're still left with you. And that's the you that you have to live with. And if you don't fix your heart, if you don't fix what's going on deep inside your human soul, then you really didn't go anywhere. You didn't fix a thing.
And I know, I've been there, 2003, I advocated. It's been almost 14 years of my transition, and it solves absolutely nothing. I don't regret what I did because it's been a journey. But in the end, what I learned is I've never run away from me. And no matter what I did to myself, I am a female.
Life's a trip, isn't it?
It is.
Hey, Mark, Lynna, I want to thank you both for coming on the show tonight and sharing your perspective.
Thank you for having me. Yes, thank you very much. Your voice here.
And if for my listeners out there, if you'd like to find out, if you're just tuning in, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show. This is episode 63, my interview with Transition Radio hosts Mark, Angelo, and Lynna Cummings here. And you can find their website and show available on transitionradio.net. I've got a link to that on the website as well. And any other links or shout outs that you guys want to put out?
I just want to thank all our supporters. Shout out to Charlotte and Eugene and all the great people that have been supporting us. Mary Lou, Michelle Smith, so many wonderful women that deserve to be recognized and loved and respected for the great women that they are.
Fantastic. Hey, I want to thank you both again for coming on the show tonight. Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Again, that was just my interview with Mark and Lynna from Transition Radio. Again, you can find this interview, episode 63, available on thequeerlife.org. You can just Google The Queer Life and find all the episodes online, available on podcast, YouTube format, available as well. Stay tuned. We're going to be going on to the news and perspectives portion of the show right after this short break. You're listening to the Queer Life Radio Show.
This is DJ Broken Record, and you are listening to KBBF 89.1 FM Calistoga.
Space exploration, catapults, tide pools. What'd you say? Animal skeletons, bottle rockets, and live raptors.
Now I remember. It's time for the North Bay Science Discovery Day, Saturday, October 24th from 10:30 a.m. to 4 p.m.
It's going to be at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds, and there will be fun, hands-on science and technology exhibits for the whole family. There's going to be booths about how to build your own race cars and robots.
Why don't you go and ask if the neighbors want to go too? Tell them it's Saturday, October 24th, starting at 10:30 a.m. at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds. Admission and parking are free.
Niños como yo escuchan KBBF 89.1 FM, la voz de tu comunidad, porque es divertida.
Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. This is episode 63, Transition Radio Interview. You can find my interview with Mark and Lynna of Transition Radio on thequeerlife.org, or you can just Google or Bing or Yahoo or DuckDuckGo or use the Onion router if you want to find The Queer Life on the web. Just Google The Queer Life or just enter your search query, The Queer Life. That was not meant to be a bad pun. It's actually called a search query. But anyhow, I was just talking with Mark and Lynna about their perspective about trans identities, or they prefer not to use the term trans identities. Very interesting, very fascinating, and I feel fantastic about sharing their perspective here on the show, because again, the name of this show is called Perspectives, and there are so many different points of views and understandings of what is gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, and again, all small pieces of what it is to be a human being. You know, and again, like I said on previous episodes, there are issues on the planet. The polar ice caps melting, and people are starving, dying all over the world, etc. This show just speaks on queer identities and highlighting those issues. But yes, I do acknowledge that there are other issues and some bigger issues, but this is just part of equal rights and understanding. I want to share an audio piece for you from what Lesbianist podcast by La Shagita, who is talking from Ireland. And La Shagita and Lesbianist podcast is exclusive to the Queer Life family. You can find her podcast available exclusively on thequeerlife.org. And she's absolutely doing some incredible work out there, and particularly for the lesbian community. So I'd like to highlight a piece for you from her from Ireland. All right, we'll be right back. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show.
Everyone, remember me? I'm that girl who records in her closet. For those of you who don't know, my name is La Shagita, and I live in Sevilla. It's a town in southern Spain. I study flamenco here. Do you think that's hot? Well, some people do. Anyway, so this summer I escaped the Sevilla heat and wandered around a bit in Scotland, England, and those green old hills of Ireland. My trip began in Dublin, where I got a quick language lesson from some lesbians who were passionately eating each other's faces in the street. I found them in Temple Bar, an area of town known for its drunken shenanigans, live Irish music, and overpriced everything. I'm walking around the streets of Dublin and I happen to run into a pack of lesbians.
Good looking bunch, by the way. You never added that.
Very good looking butch lesbians. Bunch. Okay, we're having some language issues here. Okay, anyway, they're a lovely bunch of lesbians. My lovely bunch of lesbi friends told me to get my booty on a bus and go to the city of Cork, where Pride celebrations were about to begin, which was like super amazing because it was going to be Cork's first Pride celebration since gay and lesbian marriage was legalized in Ireland last May. Cork is Ireland's third largest city, but you may have noticed it's not on the international news much. It's one of those hidden gem sorts of places. And if any of you are planning to go to Ireland, my advice is to put Cork on your list. It's a wee, quaint little town with a river running through it, and a fine selection of lesbian friends and potential lovers to choose from. As you walk through its cobblestone streets, look at the business windows and you might still see a rainbow sticker or two, or maybe even 100 that say Business for Yes Equality. That's because Cork is one of the hubs in Ireland for the LGBTQ equality movement. For a town of 150,000 peeps or so, I'd say that's pretty impressive. At the Pride Parade, I was able to talk to some of these peeps, including to some of the amazing women who helped make lesbian and gay marriage a reality in Ireland. For example, there's this one lady.
My name's Kate Moynihan.
She's really cool.
I'm the coordinator of LINK, which stands for Lesbians in Cork. We're the only community centre working with lesbian and bisexual women in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, probably nearly in Europe, I'd say.
LINK was one of the key contributors to the marriage equality movement in Cork.
It was incredible. Like, I'm so totally privileged to be in the job I'm in at a time like this. And it's actually made a huge difference already. That day on the 23rd, we were in the City Hall for the county of the votes. And you could see people already that was making a difference to them. And just walking the streets immediately afterwards, it was just the sense of finally an acceptance. And, you know, for some of us who are a bit older, it was like having lived our whole lives with sort of a sense of rejection. And suddenly people are going, no, absolutely. Why shouldn't you be allowed to get married? Yeah, and it's so much bigger than marriage. That's the thing.
Is this something that you thought you would see in your lifetime?
No, absolutely not. I thought when first civil partnership came in, I thought that might be as far as it went. And of course, for me growing up, I came out in the 80s, in the early 80s, and marriage was not thought of. There was no possibility. You wouldn't aspire to it or anything like that. It just wasn't something that came into our consciousness. And like it was homosexuality was still illegal. It was a crime at that point. You know, in the 80s. It was only 1993 that it was decriminalized.
So you could have gotten punished in the 80s?
Well, not as a lesbian, but the guys could. They didn't recognize us at all.
Sometimes benefits to being invisible.
Absolutely, yeah.
What do you think has happened to make people open up so much more in the past 20, 30 years in Ireland?
I think visibility is a huge thing. I think, people were willing to be open about their lives. People, like in True Yes Equality Cork, people went out canvassing door to door, knocking on people's door, asking them to vote yes. And through that, they actually opened up, and lots of people, we all opened up. We had to just to explain to people, that we're not any different. Our lives are we do the same things as everybody else.
I got consensus from some other people too about the fact that times are indeed a changing in Cork. For example, I met this other awesome lady named Patricia O'Connell. She works at TENI, the Transgender Equality Network of Ireland. This is what she had to say about Cork.
Yeah, it's okay. Things have changed over the years. Not long ago, it would have been probably more risky for a trans person to be out and about in the streets. But times are changing. The Irish people are becoming more accepting of trans people.
Can you tell me, please, what issues are pending for the trans community?
Well, it's a fantastic time at the moment in Ireland because marriage equality has just been passed. But as well as that, we finally got gender recognition legislation after a 20-year battle. So we're delighted with that. Pending issues then, of course, would be medical care for trans people and healthcare, generally healthcare, as well as psychiatric care. And trans intersex people who have been totally ignored, I suppose, over the years as they were last on the list, if you like.
Kate at Link agrees that there are still pending issues to resolve for the lesbians of Ireland as well.
We've the first generation of LGBT people in Ireland getting older. People go into nursing homes to do all that. It'll be the same as happened in the States. People go back into the closet. So working with older people is going to be a major issue as far as I'm concerned. There's lots of stuff. Just because this has been voted in doesn't mean to say there isn't homophobia out there and that people aren't afraid, that people aren't being beaten up still. All of that is still there. But this is huge. It's magical, really. Another day next week, actually. Tuesday we'll be starting all the rest of it. Now the pride is out of the way.
There are also young people fighting for the wide-scale acceptance of the LGBTQ community in Ireland. One of these people is
Niamh O'Reilly.
And you're here with a youth group?
Yeah.
What type of work? What's your group called?
Up Cork LGBT Youth Group.
And what type of work do you do here?
We do a lot of education and workshops and stuff. We're like a safe space for LGBT youth in Ireland to meet and make friends.
And how is it here at the schools if let's say you come out during high school? What's it like here for LGBT kids?
It differs vastly depending on the school. In my school, it was fairly all right, but there have been people who've been bullied because of it. People have had to move school. It doesn't happen as much. It's more common that people are positive, but it's still an issue here. Like one of my friends goes to school in a different school to me, and she's been physically bullied, and she's been called names, and someone tried to light her on fire. Like, it can be that bad. but it usually isn't.
Someone tried to light her on fire?
Yeah, at one stage. But it usually isn't that bad, but it can be in certain rural areas.
Okay, so minimal fire lightings. But as you can see, there's still a lot to be done. And the good news is that lots has gotten better ever since marriage equality won in May.
We've actually, in Link, because we work with women of all ages who are in the process of coming out or who've been out for forever. And these last few weeks, we've seen a big increase of women actually coming into our centre, using our centre, and who are starting that process of actually, coming out to themselves and to the world. So yeah, it's made a huge difference. And I think even for a community, that we've all worked really closely together to get this. And that's great to have built up those connections again.
During this time that you've been out, have you seen changes in Cork?
Slow, but definitely good changes, even since the referendum, let's say.
That's Stephanie. She volunteers with Link.
You see so many different same-sex couples holding hands walking down the streets, and it's incredible to see it. Really, I nearly cry every time I see it. So, it's a really good experience to see.
And how does it feel to be at this parade after such a historic decision?
Oh, it's still surreal. My mind is still blown from it. Even when people come out to you and be like, congratulations on the referendum, I'm like, that actually happened. I'm like, yeah. But even the whole door-to-door experience, there was much more positive than negative feedback. But the negative did take its toll. But the positive definitely, it made you feel okay.
Do you want to feel okay? Well, I have a suggestion for you. I think it's time for you to book a ticket to Cork. But wait a minute. Listen up for tips on how to meet the ladies. What sort of spaces are there if I'm a lesbian who's come from far away and I want to meet girls in Cork, whether just socially or to date? What recommendations would you have for me?
Well, we have out for drinks with Link, you see, and that's a really good social outlet. It happens once a month. We pick different bars around the city, so it's not necessarily a gay bar, but it's a comfortable place where women can come from everywhere, meet up, have a few drinks, have a social. But even Link on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's in for lunch. You bring your own lunch, come in for tea, coffee, and you can meet everyone and anyone in there. God only knows who's going to walk through the door.
And there you have it, Wapas. Lesbies in Ireland. Tune in to Let's Be Honest for exciting updates from Scotland and to hear about the lesbian who went on a Tinder date in Pakistan. We've got exciting stuff in store for you as La Shagita continues to travel around in search of wonder, intrigue, and female fascination. Stay tuned, people. Oh yeah, and don't forget to follow Let's Be Honest Podcast on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to us on iTunes.
All right, everybody, that was La Shagita on Let's Be Honest podcast, available exclusively on thequeerlife.org. You can find more of her stuff available on the website. And again, like she said, you can subscribe to all the services, all the web media services as well. Always a pleasure to have her reporting internationally. And she's an incredible flamenco dancer, I hear. I have yet to see her yet. Such is the ire of being in such a spread out and digital world that we live in. I want to transition here over to the next portion of the show, which is the news and perspectives portion of the show. I'll be talking about religious freedom bills that are popping up all over the United States. I'll be talking about what LGBT organizations need to tackle next. White privilege. Nancy Pelosi warns about heartbreaking spike in transgender murders, and I'll be talking about statistics on transgender murders, and I'll be finishing up with Laverne Cox starring in the Rocky Horror Picture Show remake and why it makes this advocate writer very nervous. That and more here on the Queer Life Radio Show. Be right back after this short break. All right. This article here is written by Daniel Reynolds of theadvocate.com. Florida bill tests waters of religious freedom. Now, I've been reporting on numerous religious freedom bills popping up all over the United States, which has come in response to the same-sex marriage ruling from the Supreme Court. And a lot of people who come from a Christian religious background primarily, who are saying that they need their rights protected in order to necessarily deny services or not do things based upon their religious beliefs. A Florida lawmaker has proposed a so-called religious freedom bill, echoing controversial legislation passed in recent years in Mississippi, Indiana, and Arkansas. Florida Republican Representative Julio Gonzalez filed House Bill 101 on Wednesday, which could give individuals, businesses, religious institutions, and even adoption and healthcare agencies what opponents call a license to discriminate against LGBT people in Florida. If the bill becomes law, these businesses would not have to produce, create, or, quote, deliver a product or service that violates a religious or moral principle held by a business or its employees. Gonzalez claims to have filed the bill in response to a perceived attack on, quote, religious freedoms, reports HT Politics. Quote, there have been various situations where there are increasing possibilities of subsections of society having their religious freedoms encroached upon, Gonzalez told the local news source. Over time, it became obvious to me we need to adopt some statutory protections. We have seen in other states the bakers, the photographers who don't want to participate in certain religious events, Gonzalez continued. The Catholic representative is referring to cases like Sweet Cakes by Melissa, in which anti-gay business owners and bakers, Aaron and Melissa Klein, refused to bake a cake for a lesbian couple in Oregon. The bakers were later ordered by a state agency to pay a hefty fine for violating Oregon's existing non-discrimination law, which they have since refused to pay. Earlier this year, the Florida Senate repealed the state's longtime ban on adoption by gays and lesbians, a law rendered unenforceable by a court decision 5 years ago. However, in response, conservatives have fought to pass legislation that would allow adoption agencies to deny placing children with prospective parents on moral or religious grounds. The bill filed by Gonzalez is similar to laws passed in Arkansas and Indiana, which created an intense backlash from public figures like George Takei and Miley Cyrus, as well as businesses like Apple and consumer review site Angie's List, which canceled a planned expansion of its headquarters in Indianapolis in the wake of Indiana's so-called Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which we previously reported on in this show. Critics of Gonzalez's bill, like lobbyist Carlos Guillermo Smith, worried that this, quote, sweeping anti-LGBT legislation could incite a similar firestorm in Florida. Bills like this threaten Florida's tourism-based economy and could provoke an Indiana-style backlash. It would be a disaster for Florida, Smith told the local outlet. And previously, when I was reporting on Indiana's Religious Freedom Restoration Act, that a lot of big businesses, Apple, Salesforce, Cisco, have responded in turn, saying that if we can't work with our LGBT clientele or our LGBT clientele in such states such as Indiana, then it'll be difficult for us to do business at all. So there is an economic incentive for LGBT inclusivity. But Gonzalez was unfazed by these statements. He says this is not about discriminating. He said this is about making sure the state stops at a narrowly crafted level from intruding into somebody's liberties. So it's a question of people feeling like their religious liberties are being encroached upon by LGBT advocacy and legislation in terms of of a gay couple or a lesbian couple or transgender or what have you, queer identified people looking to seek services or products from businesses that are run by people with anti-LGBT religious beliefs or morals. And so the question is, and I'm posing that to you, the listener out there, should people of religious backgrounds or using their religious background as an excuse be allowed to, on a legal basis, should they be allowed to say, no, I do not want to bake a cake for you because you're gay, or no, I don't want to serve food to you at my restaurant because you are lesbian, or no, you can't enter my store because you're transgender? Should this be protected in terms of a religious freedom right, which is what, in this case, Republican Representative Julio Gonzalez is fighting for in Florida and many others in other states? Should that be a right? Again, I'm just asking questions. I'm putting that out there to you, and I will liken this to the issues of race prior to the civil rights of the 1960s, that people of color were not allowed to use the same facilities as white people, based upon just their skin color. And we have come to a point where that has become a very obvious issue, that we are all human beings. My question is, does this apply? If somebody's gay, do they have just as much right as anybody else to take advantage of services from people who necessarily have a Christian religious background or a Muslim religious background, which and both religions do have anti-LGBT rhetoric in the Quran and the Bible. So it's a question of who's right. And again, I don't have the answer. I'm just asking questions. That's part of all this here, constant conversation about what's going on here, because yeah, it does come down to to one idea. We're all human beings. But I mean, I suppose if somebody were to walk into, like, say I was running a bakery myself, to use an exact example, and a couple who were white supremacists and had swastika tattoos on their body, and came in and asked me to bake them a cake. Should I have, let me play the devil's advocate, or turn the tables a little bit. Should I have the right to say to them, based upon, let's say, in the exact case, let's say my religion says that, or my beliefs say that I don't need to serve them, would that be right? I mean, there's a lot of arguments that go on both sides. One argument from the LGBT is that being LGBT is not harmful to other people, just being queer identified. But it depends on what your perspective is. So all perspectives are valid, and everybody feels like their perspective is right. But again, I leave that up to the people. I'm just here asking questions. Hey, you are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. You can find this episode and more available on thequeerlife.org. You are listening here on KBBF 89.1 FM Calistoga. We'll be right back after this short break to talk about what's next LGBT organizations need to do, and that's tackle white privilege. Be right back.
El sol brilla y el aire fluye con buena información a través de la frecuencia modulada de KBBF 89.1.
Enriquezca su acervo cultural. Escuche KBBF, la voz de la comunidad.
All right. Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show, LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. Again, I am your host, Kaiya Kramer, and this is episode 63, Transition Radio Interview. In the first hour of the show, I interviewed Mark Angelo and Lynna Arielle Cummings, who are a married gender variant couple and the hosts of Transition Radio's Real Talk podcast. You can find that interview and more available on thequeerlife.org. You are listening to the Queer Life Radio Show here on KBBF 89.1 FM. This show, again, just to let you know, will be rebroadcasted here on KBBF every Tuesday night from 9 to 11 p.m. and will be syndicated on KWTF 88.1 FM Bodega Bay with a web stream of that, and will be made available as a podcast. So you can get that on the podcast app on your iPhone or through iTunes, or get it on the Stitcher app, or just go to the Stitcher website and you can find it all there. It's, I mean, honestly, you can have so much ways to consume this stuff digitally. It is crazy. But next up, my next subject here is about what LGBT organizations need to tackle next, and that is white privilege. It's an article by Reverend Irene Monroe from advocate.com. With this June's historic Supreme Court ruling that legalized same-sex marriage in all 50 states, many white LGBTQ organizations nationwide have been questioning what to do next. The Harvard Alumni Association and the Harvard Gender and Sexuality Caucus last month picked up what the gauntlet to answer that very question, co-sponsoring a conference titled, "What Should We Do After, quote, I Do?" Conversations on the challenges that remain for the LGBTQ community. Harvard alumni, students, staff, faculty, and friends came up from across the country for a day-long gathering and exploring the topic with hopes of perhaps charting a future course in the unfinished struggle for LGBTQ rights and equality. The challenge of what to do next. Reach out to LGBTQ people of color appeared daunting to many of the conference attendees. And for good reason. Any outreach to communities of color will undoubtedly dredge up the history of how this country's same-sex marriage debate created much consternation and polarization between LGBTQ people of color and white LGBTQ people. With white LGBTQ political and religious organizations now attempting to bridge this historic divide, many people of color are asking what's in it for them. While many LGBTQ communities of color will embrace the larger queer population's offers of inclusivity, others feel that the white queer community in 2015 is coming a day late and $1 short, and any effort now is seen as disingenuous, if not patronizing. The bitter internal feuds among LGBTQ communities of color and the dominant community concerning framing the marriage debate and strategies employed have left both sides battle worn, and needless to say, the trip down memory lane is a painful one, with the passing of Prop 8 in California and many white gays blaming African American voters for its victory at the ballot box, possibly thanks to faulty exit polls. The struggle for marriage equality shows us all that it would be a state-by-state battle, where the demographics of each state indeed come into play. Some strategists had felt all along that people of color, both straight and queer, were liabilities, slowing, if not disrupting, LGBT progress and momentum. These activists openly stated and showed in their community strategies in organizing that they didn't want or need queer people of color, especially in predominantly white states, to win the battle. Their reason was the following: with enough successive wins from less heterogeneous LGBTQ and straight areas like Iowa, Connecticut, Vermont, and yes, even Massachusetts, the judicial endorsements of same-sex marriage not only increased public acceptance of LGBTQ nuptials, but these endorsements could conceivably push the issue of marriage equality all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, circumventing our internal wars of class, race, and homophobic faith communities entirely. Sadly, however, many of our state-by-state battles for marriage equality continued, and the issue was often framed as a single-issue agenda addressing the concerns and values of an elite few. If the people of color were part of the conversation, it was for token photo ops. Communities of color fought back, stating we cannot be deployed in the marriage equality battle in a used when needed basis. In response to how the marriage debate initially took shape, many LGBTQ people of color organizations sprung up to address their needs, focusing not only on HIV ravaging their communities, but also focusing on unemployment, gang violence, youth homelessness, and homophobic clergy, to name a few. Post-marriage equality, I've been asked by several white activists, is it now too late trying to reach out to communities of color? It's a similar question that was asked of me in 2005 when a board member of a statewide gay organization who did not want to be identified wrote to me stating the following: the board is interested in looking at its own white privilege as it seeks to work with the African American religious community. We've realized that most of our communities of faith are predominantly white communities. This concerns us. We have voted to begin a process of understanding white privilege in the ways in which we can seem to be anti-racist. I cannot speak for all communities of color, let alone the ones I identify with. However, as one who sits at the intersections of several identities, my query to white LGBTQ activists and organizations is the following: will efforts to reach out to communities of color be matched by the same agency, urgency, time, and dollars spent on marriage equality? That article was by Reverend Irene Monroe, who is a writer, speaker, and theologian living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, for theadvocate.com. And she raises some very good points. A lot of LGBT organizations and pro-LGBT organizations and pro-LGBT religious organizations are being run by either white people or LGBTQ white people, and the queer people of color, trans women of color, lesbian women of color, gay men of color has been a quieter voice. And yes, in Prop 8, the African American community was blamed for the passing of the anti-same-sex marriage bill that happened. And so there's a lot of issues, obviously, in terms of race, and this is an intersection that we're having of white privilege, of racism inherent within the LGBTQIA community. And the question and the answer to that is one that's not quite out there yet. I mean, there's a lot of steps that we can take in order to have equality amongst people of color and white people, whether queer identified or not. And this is not just a queer issue, I have to say. This is a human issue, and it's about us getting past our differences and working together and saying, oh, well, one community is more supportive of the other. Well, that's a perspective. And all perspectives are valid and come from very evidence-based reasonings. But if we stick to that belief, then we'll continue and perpetuate this idea that the LGBT organization should be run by white trans people and white gay men and white lesbians, and that trans women of color and gay men of color and lesbian women of color should only be brought out in terms of a photo op, or for or to look like the image of us all working together. But the status is that we're not, and there are a lot of reasons why it's not equal yet. But again, this is not just an LGBTQ issue. This is not just a queer issue. This is a human issue. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that the queer community doesn't just have queer issues. We have all the issues that everybody else has, everybody else that's human, as well as queer issues. So it's an understanding of what it is that makes us human. Again, that article is called "Here's What LGBT Organizations Need to Tackle Next: White Privilege" by Reverend Irene Monroe on advocate.com. You can find that article and more available on thequeerlife.org. This is episode 63 here on KBBF 89.1 FM. Next up here is a piece by Alex Wong from pinknews.co.uk. Nancy Pelosi warns about a heartbreaking spike in transgender murders. And I'll be talking a little bit more about transgender murders and the statistics on it and what's happening and how alarming it is. This article is by Nick Duffy. U.S. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi has addressed a spike in the murder of transgender people. The senior Democrat politician, who served as Speaker of the United States House of Representatives before her party lost the majority, delivered a stark warning about the number of trans women who have died in recent times. As Speaker in 2009, Pelosi passed the Hate Crimes Prevention Act, which outlawed homophobic and transphobic crime amid fierce opposition. Asked about the 21 murders of trans women in the U.S. so far this year, she said, "You mentioned the hate crimes bill we passed. When we did, at that time, there was some resistance." Quote, "People would say to me, you can pass this hate crimes bill in a second if you didn't include transgender. And I said, well, I'm never going to pass it in a million years if we don't include transgender, because it's important for it to be inclusive. And transgender people are probably the most in need of a hate crimes bill. We can pass a law. We can help to break down barriers in people's minds now. We have to get to their hearts. It's heartbreaking to hear of violence against anyone and the vulnerability of our transgender community." She added that the trans community themselves must take the lead in any efforts to address their problems. The Democrat said, "I met some of the transgender community in San Francisco recently about a number of issues where we go on the equality bill that we're very proud of to broaden anti-discrimination laws to include many other ends of discrimination. What I said to them is, we want to listen specifically to the transgender community to hear what some of their suggestions might be as we go forward, as we see this sadness. We want everything to be inclusive, but in order to enforce the law, we have to listen to the community, because sadly, they're on the front line of this." There's actually a clip of Nancy Pelosi speaking about this. You can find that link available on thequeerlife.org, episode 63, which is what this episode is, but I want to take a moment to talk about the amount of transgender murders that are happening. According to planettransgender.com, editor Kelly Busey writes on one article called "Trans People Band Together and Ask, Can You Stop Killing Us for 1 week?" She notes this statistic that a trans woman is slain every 29 hours, yet we make up less than 1% of the world's population. Transgendercide is taking place. Certain segments of society have declared war on us, and we're dying at a rate that endangers the existence of our very community. Again, let me repeat that. A trans woman is killed every 29 hours, and we are less than 1% of the world's population. That is a huge number of us that are being killed nearly every single day. From pathos.com, some murder statistics of transgender people. Although social acceptance for transgender people is growing, parents continue to abandon youth with gender identity issues when their children need the most, advocates say. 49% of transgender people attempt suicide. Transgender youth account for 18% of homeless people in cities such as Chicago, but researchers estimate fewer than 1 in 1,000 people is transgender. 1 in 12 transgender people in America is murdered. That's very nearly, let me pull out my little calculator program here. That's 8.3% of transgender people in America are murdered. That is a huge percentage of our population when we're already such a small portion of the population. It asks the question, why? Why are transgender people murdered, particularly trans women of color who are at a higher risk of being raped or murdered? These are some of the questions that I'm asking here, and if you are curious about it, you can find the links to what I'm talking about available on thequeerlife.org. It also goes on to say transgender youth whose parents pressure them to conform to their anatomical gender report higher levels of depression, illegal drug use, suicide attempts, and unsafe sex than peers who receive little or no pressure from parents. And less than 1 to 1.5% of individuals experience persistent regret after sex reassignment surgery. Now, mind you, my previous guest put out the statistic that 20% of people who have had gender reassignment surgery have gone on to regret it or commit suicide. And so it depends on where your sources are, but my point here is that there are a lot of trans people either committing suicide or getting murdered, and that's incredible. That's outstanding in a completely horrific way. And I'm telling you this not to scare you, not to judge you, not to tell you what to do, but I'm telling you this to inform you that the transgender community is a community that is still struggling to receive autonomy in our society, to be given the right to live and to be allowed to function in our society. Whether or not you agree with the lifestyles of transgender people is irrelevant, but it's whether you agree that transgender people should live, or that transgender people should have the tools to live or get the help to live. Are there other issues at stake? Family issues, personal issues, mental health issues, chemical issues, blah blah blah. They're probably, perhaps, that's part of. But again, it's what I was saying before. Trans people, queer people have all the same issues that every other human being has, but they also have the issue of being trans or queer identified. And for those of you out there who are questioning your gender identity, who think you might be transgender or gender variant or gender queer, or you just don't want to be what the world is telling you should be in terms of your gender expression or your gender identity, I posit to you that your identity, your sense of self, your growth, and your healing as a human being is the most important thing you can focus on. And if you are in an unsafe space because of your expression, because of your gender identity, because of your sexual orientation, I urge you to get help. Help is out there. I have a help page on the Queer Life website, and there's also crisis hotlines that I have available on the Get Help page. On there, there's mental health professionals. There is help out there. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy. I'm not saying that it's going to be simple, and I'm not saying that it's going to be fast for you to get to a safe place or for you to feel safe about expressing your gender expression or your queer identity. It will take time, and it will most likely be painful, emotionally, perhaps physically, but I will constantly advocate for people to find a way to live their life and be as authentic as possible so that you can lead a healthy and productive life. Because if you're constantly having to hold back, if you're constantly feeling like you are less than, how are you able to produce? How are you able to be a productive part of the larger community that is the state of California, Sonoma County, San Francisco, the United States, planet Earth? It's about being healthy. It's about your own experience. And that's what I want to leave you with. It can be okay. I promise. It can be. It's going to be hard. I can guarantee that as well, but it can get better. Again, you've been listening to the Queer Life Radio Show. LGBT news, modern perspectives, roundtable discussions, and interviews. This has been episode 63, Transition Radio Interview. You can find this episode and more available on thequeerlife.org. Thank you for listening. You are listening to KBBF 89.1 FM, Calistoga. Have a wonderful, wonderful night. I'm going to leave you with that message there. And if you're listening to KBBF, get ready for the next programming, Corazon a Corazon. So we've got some good stuff, as always, lined up for you here.